Right, so we've been looking at the kind of background, development, and the writings connected to the Rastafarian movement, Rastafarian religion, if you want to call it that, okay. We can see that it's influenced by Christian ideas, it's influenced by Jewish ideas in the Old Testament, kind of via Christianity, also influenced by social, political thinking amongst people of African descent in Jamaica during that time as well. So it's a sort of mixture of various traditions and so on, and it also, in the form of things like this, has got even some direct African texts as part of it. So it's a religion in a sense, and in another sense it's a broader movement in a way. Let's have a look at some of their ideas and practices now, and then we can, as I said, probably finish a bit early today, having come to the end of this topic. Okay, so like we've done with the other ones, let's ask, what do the Rastafarians believe? What's their beliefs and so on? Firstly, and most importantly, as we've already said, Haile Selassie, His Imperial Majesty, is God incarnate. That's the kind of main idea we can perhaps say. They sometimes call him Jah, or Jah Almighty, or even Jah Tafari, as I think they pronounce it, okay, taking from the Rastafari name. Jah here comes, and he guesses where we've had the word, I think, at least once here. Anyone know where the word Jah comes from? I think it comes from Jehovah, which is from Yahweh. This is an English form, anglicized form of Yahweh, which is an old Jewish word for God. Okay. And it's somehow been kind of presumably reduced to those elements. Exactly what they believe about Haile Selassie varies between different groups of Rastafarians. There are different interpretations. I think there are some groups that say, no, we don't really accept that he is God in the body. He just symbolizes or reflects Jesus Christ. So some of them don't go all the way and say that he's God incarnate, okay? Others say that what he is he's both God the Father and God the Son. So in terms of the Trinity that we've discussed on more than one occasion, okay, Haile Selassie represents or includes two parts, and the Holy Ghost, the Holy Spirit, the other part, is kind of in human beings. We have the Spirit in us, they say. So we have God the Father, God the Son, which is part of Haile Selassie of Jah, and then we have the Holy Spirit here. Put that in to make sure we don't confuse, which is kind of inside us, inside humans. That's another possible interpretation. And as we said, as God incarnate, as this Messiah figure, his role was supposed to be, for many Rastafarians, to lead people back to Africa, to lead people of African descent and to establish African freedom and independence and so on. We're coming to this bit here now. So he was a religious, but also it had a kind of political or social role as well. What do we understand by these two names in the context of the Old Testament, in the context of ancient Jewish ideas? Babylon and Zion. Do you know anything about those things? Sorry? Which one? Right. Yaz, what can you add anything to this? What you? Babil, okay. Well, originally what we call in English Babylon obviously was a a state, an ancient state in the Near East, okay, Mesopotamia. If you'd done HCIV101 and done ancient Mesopotamia, you'd have done Sumeria and elsewhere, and then Babylonia was one of the big empires, early empires in the Near and Middle East, okay. Also at that time, there was a small Jewish state. Solomon, we mentioned before, was one of the kings of ancient Judea and of Israel. And what happened is that the Babylonians conquered the state of Israel, okay, and took it over because they were expanding their country into become an empire. And if you think, yeah, go on.
Is it the thing that the Jews must be lived in 7 or 8 years in Babylonia?
Yeah, it's their exile. Okay, that's correct. So what happened is when the Babylonians conquered Israel, destroyed part of Israel, conquered it, and so on, many Jews were taken away from Jerusalem and taken into exile into Babylonia. Okay, so they talk about the Babylonian exile, a period when the Jewish people are not living in their promised land, in the land that God promised to them. They have been taken away, removed as slaves or whatever, and they're living in Babylonia. And then they were thinking, well, eventually shall return to our promised land, we shall return to the land that God gave us. And this, of course, is the concept of Zion. Okay, so Babylon is the place where the Jews were in exile, taken away. Zion becomes the concept, the word for the promised land that they will return to. God will help them to return back to their original land. Okay, and in the 19th century and early 20th century, Zionism becomes the word for the idea of setting up the Jewish state. Okay, the background to what becomes modern Israel, of course. And you do occasionally have the word Zionist often as a negative one, as a way of attacking the modern state of Israel or whatever. We won't go into that here, this is a different issue. But in the Old Testament then, in the old part of the Bible, there is this theme from the Jewish history of them being taken away and put in Babylon, but they want to return back to their home, they want to return back to Zion. Okay, this is putting it very simply. So Pan-Africanists, and especially Rastafarians with their religious perspective, took these concepts and said, well, it's the same for Africans. Because of slavery and because of colonialism, we have been taken away from our own land, and we've been brought to mostly the Americas, okay? And we want to return to our land. We want to return to Africa. So they will use Babylon to mean white people and white people's lifestyle and white people's country and so on. And Zion here means for them Africa. Okay, and quite a few reggae songs refer to Zion. You'll have that as a theme which recurs in reggae songs, the concept of Zion and so on. Okay. So they've taken the Jewish themes and they've put it to their own context. Okay, they're comparing themselves to the Jews and they're saying we will escape from white man's control, from slavery, from colonialism, and we will be returning to Africa, to our Zion, where we should be. Okay, and this again partly feeding in from ideas of Marcus Garvey and others. Okay, but here with a very strong religious element, or strong religious theme. So these are the two big ideas. Okay, these are the two big concepts, focusing on Haile Selassie, and then this position of Africans, sometimes called Ethiopians, meaning Africans, and their return to Africa in some form or other, literally in some cases. A couple of other concepts I've thrown in, we can mention very briefly. One is called everlasting life. And again, not all of them believe this, I don't suppose, but some Rastafarians believe that a number of very, very special Rastas will live in the same body forever, and they don't need to have medical treatment. They will live forever. Okay, not all of them. They don't all claim that they will live forever. I even think that maybe Bob Marley had some version of this idea, and so he was refusing medication, doctor's treatment when he was sick, and eventually he died, of course, because he wasn't going to live forever. But some of them therefore believe, because of God or because of Haile Selassie's power and so on, that they will live in their same body forever. They will have everlasting life. And obviously in most cases they're going to be disappointed, I suppose, but that's one idea. Slightly more complicated is this idea of I and I, which also comes up here. Okay, sometimes they like to add the pronoun, in English I, ben in Turkish. And instead of saying you and I, instead of making you and I as separate things, and I am me, but you are you, somehow you're different from me, okay? They say everyone has got some of God in them. God is in all of us. So we're all really unified in God. So let's not emphasize our difference. Let's not be subjective and say there's me and there's you, because we're all part of God. We're all part of the same spirit in that sense. So they use the concept of I and I to say I and I. Okay, we're the same, really. We're together in that sense. So it's trying to be more kind of objective about our relationship in that sense. And it creeps up. Then they get these things. They stress this there. So again, Jah I mighty. Okay, instead of Almighty or something. They put it in other words, or they stress it. Rastafari, they say. They stress the I, rather than Rastafari, which is how we might properly pronounce it. But they stress the I there in words to try and emphasize this I-ness, this unity of people with God, with Haile Selassie, and so on. And again, this is just a kind of mental idea or perception in a way. Okay, any questions there?
About this I and I issue, do they refer this I and I to between black people? I mean, what about a Rastafarian and a Christian? Will the Rastafarian call a Christian I and I?
Possibly not. This is probably more an internal Rastafarian kind of a thing, because obviously they do make the distinction here between white Babylonians and black people from Africa. So this is more a way of when they're conversing amongst themselves, talking about things themselves, I think. Okay, not sure. Okay, here's Bob again, smoking something that he shouldn't be doing, or should be doing, depending on your perspective and so on. Let's have a look then, lastly, at some aspects of the kind of religious life of Rastafarians. We should say right at the beginning that Rastafarianism is not a very organized or hierarchical religion or movement. It's not like the Catholic Church, where you have the Pope and bishops and priests and things like that. And even other religions that are not quite so organized still have a structure, and you have certain things you must do and people who we control. So it's far more loose than some of the other religions we've been looking at in terms of what you can and cannot do, and in terms of the power structure and things like that. It's quite a loose organization. So a lot of the things we're saying now, and some of the things you said before about belief, okay, not everyone follows that way or that way. There are differences of their interpretation and versions and understanding and whatever. And no one can actually then say you must do this or you must do that or whatever. Okay, run through these in turn. Again, in terms of worship, okay, because it is on the one level a religion, they have two kinds especially of what we would call kind of meetings, times when they get together and do things which are a little bit religious in one way or another. So they have one kind which is called a grounation, bingi or bingi, and then other ones which are called reasonings. Grounations are like kind of big festivals or something, where they will have music and dancing. Some of them will be smoking cannabis, ganja as they call it. Okay, not all of them do that, as we shall see. There will be food, and it may last for a few days. Okay, it's just a big get-together where they will sort of interact and so on, and think about God and other things while doing things together in a kind of relaxed fashion. And these are what they call groundations. Reasonings, rather more specific, they'll be more like discussion sessions, meetings, but they'll be quite informal. They're not kind of, I am the boss, I am the bashkan of this meeting and things like that. It's not quite like that. But this is where they will get together. They again might be smoking, but they'll be discussing things, ethical, religious issues. Okay, they'll have a chance to actually discuss things and think about them. So it's perhaps less music and dancing there, more kind of for discussion and thinking and so on. But as far as I know, they don't have things like Sunday or Juma and things like that, and proper churches and so on. These are more big gatherings, loose gatherings, and so on. They have a number of days in the year which are special days for them, considered to be holy days. For example, because they have a Christian background, but because they like African Christianity, they celebrate Christmas Day, but they have the Eastern Christmas. Okay? In Western Christianity, in Western Europe where I come from, we have 25 December is Christmas Day. In the East, it's at the beginning of January, and so they celebrate Christmas Day on the 7th of January, following the kind of Ethiopian African tradition. Okay? 21st April is called Groundation Day, and that's the day when Haile Selassie came to Jamaica, to Kingston, we mentioned before, okay, 1966. And that's big G there, it's Groundation Day. I guess this ground, I don't know where it comes from, it might be from ground. It was when he came to the ground, arrived on the ground, but I'm kind of guessing with that one, I'm not so sure. They also celebrate a number of other days, including, for example, Haile Selassie's coronation, his birthday, and the birthday of Marcus Garvey as well, okay, because he's a prophet, so they for them, in a sense, so they celebrate that one, okay. So a number of days in the life of Haile Selassie, especially Christmas Day and the birthday of Marcus Garvey. And these are special days, they'll have special meetings and things on these days. Dietary rules, okay, like all the religions, they have some ideas about what you should and shouldn't eat and consume in various ways. But again, this is kind of fairly flexible, fairly variable in a sense. It depends on the individual. So we've already mentioned the cannabis, the ganja, as they call it, okay, which for them is a way of helping you to think a more relaxed way about things and to inspire you. So for those that smoke cannabis, I don't think they all do necessarily on a regular basis, but think that they can read the Bible or one of the other books, smoking, and it'll help them to understand in that sense, okay. They also say that people who make it illegal, that's a Babylon thing, that's the white man saying, no, you shouldn't have this drug, okay, so they're banning it in that sense. So for us, obviously, it is an interesting concept. For them, it's, it's sort of religious. Okay, it has a religious importance in that sense. In addition, for food, they have various rules. Okay, some, not all of them. Some Rastafarians are vegetarians. Okay, they eat no meat. Okay, some of them follow a purely vegetarian diet. Others look at the Old Testament again. They look at the old parts, the Jewish part, and Judaism, like Islam, has got a number of rules about eating and so on, things like that. And it's often called Ital diet. Again, that must be our friend I there, I suppose, which then says particularly they should have natural food, things that have not been processed and things. It should be what they would call clean food, again, that concept you see in pure food, you see in Judaism and Christianity and so on. So in some cases they say you shouldn't eat meat. Some people say meat is kind of dirty. Others say at least pork. Okay, at least like in Judaism and Islam, you shouldn't eat pig meat because that's considered to be dirty in these traditions. No alcohol, they might say, and tobacco. Kind of seems a bit odd when you've got this going on at the same time, but there's they have reasons for that and so on. And sometimes some of them will say they don't want to eat seafood. Okay, things, not fish, but the other things, the crabs and other things which can be caught in the sea because they're dirty, they're not clean and so on.
They smoke weed, but not a regular cigarette.
Yeah, some of them do, not all of them. Yeah, I mean, not all of them smoke cannabis, and not all of them don't smoke cigarettes, okay, tobacco, but others think that tobacco is bad for you in a way that weed is not, okay, as far as I understand. Sorry? Yeah. I mean, but obviously, I'm not going to defend or explain. I'm just saying this is what I've understood and read when I've been preparing for the class and so on. But again, the important point is to say that what they do varies between individuals. Okay, they will follow these. Some of them will do this. Some of them won't do that. Some of them are vegetarian. Some of them possibly smoke cigarettes. Some of them don't, and things like that. I don't know.
Actually, you never see Jamaicans go and start a war, so smoking that thing should be good.
Right, okay, it's kind of relaxing, you mean. Yeah, okay, peace man and all that, yes. Maybe that will be a good thing. We're being filmed, so we have to be a bit careful about what we say, obviously. So, like many religions, they have some rules, but not kind of strict rules about what you can and cannot consume and so on. And then we put the use of cannabis into that context as well. All right, again, we associate dreadlocks, the way that they prepare their hair, with Rastafarians. It's a common thing. It's not something you have to do to be a Rastafarian. I don't think you have to do your hair in that way. There are references again in the Old Testament and the Jewish part of the Bible about things to do to the hair, so they sometimes connect dreadlocks with that to try and explain why they treat their hair in this special kind of a way. And it's primarily, I think, an identity thing. A bit like when we were talking about Sikhs and so on. It's not kind of purely religious. It also has this function of providing you with your kind of personal, social, cultural identity in that way. But they don't all have to do that. I don't think it's not something which is universal for Rastafarians, but many of them do, or the ones that we recognize do as well. Amharic religion, language I mentioned before. What was that? Amharic was... Yes, the national language of Ethiopia is still, okay, though I think they're encouraging some of the other more regional languages these days as well. The current dominant Ethiopian language. And it's important because they believe that the Bible was originally written in this language, okay, which is kind of odd because in fact we don't really have Amharic literature until about 500 or 600 years ago, and the Bible is much older. But they believe that it was originally kind of African Bible and that. So many of them try and learn Amharic. It's quite a difficult language to learn. It has a different script for a start, quite a complicated system the Ethiopians use. But the grammar is quite interesting. And Amharic has got some kind of what we would call Semitic grammar. It's quite similar to Arabic, but they've also changed some parts of the grammar as well because of African influences from other languages. So it's not an easy language to learn, but many of them think they should learn Amharic because it's the ancient language. It's like Arabic for Islam or something like that, or Latin or Greek for Christianity. It's the ancient special language, so they should have that one there. As I said before, lastly, there is no formal structure. There is no kind of hierarchy where you have someone at the top, the boss of the Rastafarians or whatever, and then a series of people underneath. There have been at different times kind of certain groups of and gatherings which have had some importance, and the House of Dreadlocks is one of these. Okay, it can have, I think, up to about 72 members. Organised by an assembly, a group of elders, of kind of older, wiser Rastafarians, I suppose, okay? And they will discuss things and make some sort of decisions or whatever, but it's all quite loose, and I don't think they can impose laws and say, you must do this. We've decided that all Rastafarians must do this. It's just one of a number of times when Rastafarians may get together in one context or another to discuss things and so on. So it's not really a formal organising body like you have in some other religions and so on. Okay, that comes to the end of our 4 religions. Any questions or comments? Anything you want to ask about? I think the themes we need to think about here, and many of you will be doing your essay on one of these religions in one way or another. The themes we need to look at here is, again, the influence of older traditions. Okay, religions don't just appear from nowhere. Although, if you believe it, you believe in revelation, you believe in someone receiving the truth from God. So there is a point when you say the religion begins. But if we approach them from an historical perspective, then you can see in all of the 4 religions we've been looking at the influences of one, or sometimes more than one, existing religion. And what they do is they take some parts and change it, they take some parts and keep it, and in other cases they reject or go against some of the other parts. And sometimes they kind of combine things from various religions. So for the Sikh religion, we saw it was Hinduism, the old ancient Indian traditions, and obviously Islam in the north of India was very important. And we can see elements of both of those in Sikh belief, and then other new things as well. For our friends the Mormons, okay, we saw strong influence, obviously, of Christianity there, mainly. That was the background to the Mormons, but they have a very different view of things than standard, the dominant Christians have. And they've got this kind of Americanism part as well, stressing the importance of America in their religion. For the Baha'i faith, obviously a strong influence of Islam and Shia Islam as believed in Iran, but also the influence of kind of Western ideas and modern ideas of democracy and unity and things like that coming in, plus the very important relative idea that they don't have the last truth, they're not the truth, they're only part of the truth, and the things will carry on. So there's an interesting twist there in a way. And then lastly with these guys, we see the influence of kind of black movements, political movements, whatever, given a religious element through the Bible, the Old Testament, the very important role of Judaism and the African element of that, plus some Christian ideas as well, plus new things that are going on. So it's a mixture of various elements that create the religion. So you need to look at that, you need to think about that in your essays. How are these religions coming along? Okay, any last questions? No? Okay, well, let's finish 15 minutes early or something like that, okay? See you all on Monday. I'm going to put together, we finished the lecturing now, so I'm going to prepare some sort of activities and thinking things to finish us off. Then we'll have at least one presentation on Wednesday. Our other 2 presenters seem to have disappeared again. And then we will have our exam 1 week from now, okay? Does everyone here have the guide? I gave the exam guide. Did you all have that? Were you all here when I gave the guide for the exam? Emre, did you get that? Or no, let me see if I've got a copy then. We need to make sure that everyone is ready to prepare for that. So we briefly went through this. Anyone got any questions about the exam from what we said earlier in the week or not? Thanks. If you have any questions or uncertainties, you can speak in the class next week, or you can send me an email. Okay, let me know if you've got any questions for that. Otherwise, have a nice weekend. See you all on Monday.